Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I'm your host, Rajni Bharara. And before I move ahead, I would like to read out this very important disclaimer. By watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. All right. After this very important disclaimer, welcome back, everyone. You're watching Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I am Rajni Bharara, your host. And today we have a very special guest joining us for the first time. We are diving deep into the world of immigration law with Tsui Yee, an esteemed attorney who brings over 2 decades of experience to the table. Today's episode is all about mastering your immigration journey. And we would have a better expert than Tsui Yee to guide us through it. Let me tell you a bit about her. Sue is the founder of Law Offices of Tsui Yee, and she has been practicing immigration law since 1999. Her expertise spans family and employment-based petitions, removal defense, asylum, and more. Sue graduated from University of California, Los Angeles School of Law and has received numerous accolades, including being named a super lawyer in immigration law since 2016, a designation that is bestowed on less than 5% of attorneys. She was also one of the outstanding 50 Asian Americans in business by the Asian American Business Development Corporation in 2016. She is a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association and the Asian American Bar Association of New York. Without any further ado, Sue, welcome to the show. Welcome to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Rajni. How are you doing?
I am also doing fine, and it's a pleasure having you on the show. And this is our first time, so before I move ahead with our topic and our discussion, I would like to know from you because you have such an impressive background, so in immigration law. So can you share with our audiences, some highlights of your journey and what drew you to immigration?
Sure. I've been practicing immigration for 25 years now. It's hard to believe. I have always been interested in immigration because of my personal family history. So, I come from a family of immigrants. I'm the first in my family to be born in the United States. And I grew up just kind of witnessing the struggles and the difficulties that my parents went through and also my grandparents. So immigration was always a topic that was very close to me. Growing up, my parents, gave up a lot to move to the United States. They both immigrated from China for better opportunities. So I saw how hard they worked, and they basically scraped and saved every single penny so that they can raise a family. So it's a direct result of the hard work of my parents that I was able to be like the first in my family to go to college, to become a professional. And it's something that always is in the back of my mind. If it weren't for my parents, I don't know what kind of future I would have had, or my brothers as well. So I kind of knew when I was in law school that I wanted to practice immigration law. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years.
Wow, that's really really inspiring, Sue. So thank you so much for sharing a bit of your journey with us, and that's really inspiring. And I'm sure it must have motivated a lot of other immigrants also who are watching us right now on different platforms. So before I move ahead, guys, I would like to tell you that we are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. And the handle is, and also on Facebook, and the handle is Immigration Talk Show. So don't forget to subscribe to us. And if you have any question that you would like to ask from Sue related to our topic, which is about immigration journey, you can comment them below, and we'll be delighted to answer your questions. All right. So now, Sue, without any further ado, let's get started. So we are talking about immigration today, and we are talking about how and when, where a, a person should hire an attorney, right? And the correct attorney for their case,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, what can the audiences expect from this episode?
So I thought I would talk about, the importance of hiring the right immigration lawyer. And the
Mhm.
reason why I chose this topic is because over the years, when I've provided so many consultations to clients, by the time they find me, their immigration case has already been botched. They basically
Mhm.
hired either an attorney who didn't really have competency in the type of case that they were handling,
Mhm.
or they hired someone who they didn't know was not actually an immigration lawyer. And
Right.
so, especially in the field of immigration law, this is a problem that is more prevalent than in other areas of law. Why is that? It's because a lot of immigration clients um, may not speak English as their, first language. So already
Right.
there's already the potential for miscommunication. There's the
Mhm.
potential to be taken advantage of, to be exploited. And
Mhm.
so, you know, you would be surprised, but there have been many clients who kind of just blindly trusted the person they were hiring, didn't
Mhm.
even question whether or not the person they were hiring was actually a licensed attorney.
Right.
um, and so there's many things that you can do to make sure that you don't become a victim of being taken advantage of. So for one thing is you can check an attorney's credentials.
Mhm.
Check to see, ask them, where are they licensed, which state. You know, someone who holds themselves out as an immigration lawyer, you want to
Mhm.
know where they're licensed.
Of
You
course.
want to know also if they have ever been through any kind of disciplinary proceeding. Has any client ever filed a complaint against them
Mhm.
for, malpractice, for example? Um, and so I think with every state, you can find out and see if an attorney is actually currently licensed. So that's one thing. Another thing is sometimes, even if the person is an actual attorney, they may have their license suspended, right,
Mhm.
for engaging in unethical behavior.
Right.
There have been many immigration lawyers in the past who have had their license to practice taken away
Mhm.
because they committed immigration fraud, or they basically misappropriated their clients' funds. They took their
Mhm.
clients' money and didn't do the legal work that they promised to do. So there's a lot of potential, unfortunately, where attorneys have mishandled cases, missed filing deadlines, which then had really drastic negative consequences on the client.
Mhm.
So, first and foremost, know who it is that you're hiring, check their credentials, make sure that their credentials are also up to date. So, there's many things that you can do to arm yourself, Um, just kind of be very judicious about who you decide to hire. That's one tip. The other thing I want to mention is that just because someone is an immigration lawyer doesn't mean they're an expert in all matters immigration.
Mhm.
Immigration is a very complicated area of law. Not
Mhm.
only is it complicated, but there's changes almost every day, you
Right.
know.
Mhm.
So law isn't static. It doesn't stay the same for years and years. If
Mhm.
anything, immigration is one of the most kind of volatile areas of law. And I think especially because it is affected very much by politics, depending on who is, currently in the administration, meaning who is currently president of the United States, that's going to
Mhm.
dictate
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
a lot of immigration policies. So I think it goes without saying that with the upcoming election that's only happening in a few months, it's a big question mark. We really don't know who will be the president of the United States.
Mhm.
Um, and if any of you were tuning into the first presidential debate,
Yeah.
a lot of people are worried. I was practicing 2 administrations back, and I will say that that was the most chaotic time in my career.
Mhm.
And there were moments when I thought, I don't really know how much more, I can continue practicing, or how much longer my clients can kind of withstand the fear and the uncertainty of what could happen. So even if someone is an immigration attorney, find out what their core focuses are in terms of the work, the cases that they process, because there, a lot of immigration attorneys will specialize in one facet of immigration law. For example, only deportation defense, or only family immigration, or only business or employment immigration. So you want to be clear for the type of case that you have. Ask the attorney that you're consulting with or thinking of hiring, do you have experience with my specific type of case? There are some types of cases, immigration cases, that I don't handle, or I will handle with a co-counsel. And that's all because immigration is so complicated. There's no way that one immigration attorney can know how to file every single type of immigration case that's out there.
Right, right. Of course. Thank you so much for answering the question in so much detail, and thank you also for talking about the current mess that happened in the first presidential debate. I mean, I have spoken to a lot of attorneys, and sometimes they are a bit hesitant to talk about political issues. But I'm so glad that you mentioned about it. So thank you so much for doing that. So, okay, I would like to know from you, now that you have spoken about that you have mentioned about this debate and about politics, I would like to know something from you. So, what do you think? I mean, because people are expecting Trump to be back. There are high chances of him being back, and right, and
Mm-hmm.
I have heard that people are really expecting that, but people were also expecting the same in France too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't go as it was planned, and the other
Right,
party won, right?
right,
So
right.
what's your take on this? What would you like to say?
I think my take on it is I try not to get too swept up by what could happen in the future. I mean, I try to plan, but I don't want to catastrophize. I don't want to like ring the alarm bells and have clients freaking out. I will say that, it was very stressful when the previous administration was in place. Um, but at the same time, I did not see a lot of significant changes once the current administration took over. I mean, so I think the answer lies somewhere in between, Um, I'm not like trying to, pack my bags and immigrate to another country if, let's say, a certain person would be voted into office.
Right.
I guess the thing is, you never know what will happen, but you just kind of want to prepare yourself, but not get too caught up, because the thing is, if you just kind of like worry about all the possible negative things that could happen, that itself can, it's going to have a toll on your mental health,
Of
especially for
course.
immigration lawyers. I know a lot of immigration lawyers were kind of experiencing burnout and considering leaving the profession entirely.
Wow.
And looking back, you have to find ways to stay resilient, to, just kind of like take care of yourself and make sure that you don't, get too overwhelmed and too stressed out by eventually like what could happen. Don't live in that space.
Right. Of course. Of course. But but what do you think if Trump comes back? What are those things that is going to change in the immigration policies? I mean, is it
Well,
going to be good, or is it going to be, let's say, I mean, worse than what it is right now?
my instinct tells me it's probably not going to be a good thing because we all know the things that he has said about immigrants in
Okay.
general. But I mean, Trump is very chameleon-like, right? I don't think he really has any values. I think he says what he wants. He says what his supporters want to hear. So whatever suits him, whatever will help him, he will kind of just, say whatever he thinks his audience wants to hear. Um, the one thing I do think would change if he were to become president is that the recent announcements that Biden made about, benefits for spouses, undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens, the parole in
Right.
place, for example,
Yeah.
and also the, processing of visas for DACA recipients. I haven't really been holding my breath because if Trump does become president, I'm almost sure he will not be following through on these two, measures that President Biden announced. So, I guess my takeaway after practicing for this long is don't hold your breath. Whatever the current administration is saying they want to implement, take it
Uh-huh.
with a grain of salt. A lot of things are said to appease certain, interests.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes the administration in power wants to make it look as if they're doing enough or trying to address a problem. But a lot of it is PR, right? A lot of it is them saying,
Of course.
hey, we tried to do this, we announced this program. But my question is, in reality, how many of these applications were actually processed? How many of these applications were actually approved? So
Right.
one example is something called entrepreneurial parole,
Mhm.
which the Biden administration announced a few years ago. And when you read it, it sounds great. Any entrepreneurs in the United States who don't have status, who are undocumented, the idea was that they could apply for something called parole, which is basically a permission to to parole is kind of hard to define or explain, but generally it means like a permission to kind of enter the United States so that you could eventually apply for permanent residence. So military parole in place, for example, is something that currently exists. Well, there was something similar announced for entrepreneurs, but as to the total number of applications that were filed under this program, we don't
Mhm.
really know. I don't think USCIS has really said anything.
Okay.
And I have at least one client who's really interested in applying for this, but because we don't know the chances of success,
Mhm.
we're a little hesitant to come forward and apply.
Mhm.
So, just don't believe everything that the immigration agency is claiming that they're doing. A lot of it is kind of like for optics.
Of course. And you know, what the politician promises. I mean, uh, are those things going to be real or not? That's a topic for completely another episode, right? I mean,
Right.
trusting politicians and their promises. That's a completely different topic for some other episode. But thank you so much for talking about it. But we completely moved away from the topic of our today's episode. But still, I would like to come back to that. But again, in a bit. I'm so sorry about the lag. I think there's a bit lag happening. I don't know from my end. I'm so sorry about it. I'll try to make
Okay.
it better. But if you can hear me fine, I would like to know that, okay, Trump also promised about recently in a podcast, he said that he's going to give green cards to college graduates, right? As soon as the students get graduated from the college, he's going to give them green cards so that they can have jobs and they can add to the US's economy, right? So he
Mhm.
also mentioned it, and it became quite a thing on social media. Everyone was talking about it. It was all over the internet.
Mhm.
So what do you think? I mean,
No, I
again,
don't believe it.
politicians and their promises
No,
can't trust. But what's your
I
take?
don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
Look
Okay.
at his track record.
Yeah.
When he was the president during his administration, I mean, we saw mass denials of all kinds of applications. USCIS was being really harsh on H-1B petitions, issuing really obnoxious requests for evidence. I mean, you know, um, their attitude was just prove to us that you deserve for your petition or application to be approved, and prove it to us with a higher burden of proof. Um, so the general rule is that anything that you file with immigration, your burden of proving that you meet the requirements is just a preponderance of the evidence. That's a pretty, it's not an impossible standard. It's actually a really easy standard to meet. But in reality, USCIS does not follow this rule. They conveniently forget about it. And you can see from the RFEs that they issue that they're making things up. They're applying, the officer's own burden of proof. You would sometimes think that they're holding you to like proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which only applies in criminal, criminal prosecutions. So this was, the percentages of cases being issued RFEs, notices of intent to deny, denial percentages, they were higher under his presidency. So I don't for a second believe that he's going to be, handing out green cards to, students who have, higher education.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for again answering the question in such a great way. And our audiences are also a lot interested about answering. Asking their question. So we already have started receiving a lot of questions from the audiences. I mean, yes, we did say that we are going to take them after the break, but if you allow, I would like to take some.
Sure.
All right. So if we can please have some questions from the audiences. Okay. Okay. The first is about from Govind, and he has posted it on YouTube. And he says, "Is there any update for second round of the H-1B 2025?" I mean, we are getting this question continuously on all our episodes. What do you have to say?
I don't really know. I mean, I think it depends on the first batch of H-1Bs that were picked, because the deadline to submit the H-1B passed on June 30th, right? So then we have to see how many of these H-1B petitions are ultimately approved by USCIS. How many are going to be denied? How many of these visas are actually going to be used, right? There are, just because you're selected doesn't mean that every single employer whose registration was selected actually follows through with filing an H-1B petition. So I think USCIS has to count up. And if there's over, so for me, I think it's too early to tell. I think the year before, USCIS ran 2 other subsequent rounds, and those happened like months later in the year. So, I'm not an expert when it comes to estimating these things. The only thing I can say is just whenever immigration decides that they have enough leftover numbers, they'll make an announcement and they'll say, "Hey, we've run a second round. Check your USCIS account to see if you've been selected." So,
right. But can the applicants be at least hopeful?
I say sure, why not? I mean, the thing is, the interesting thing is like this year, none of my clients were selected in the lottery. So I didn't expect that to happen. The year before, I had a decent number of registrations that were selected. But even when I talked to my other attorney friends, the percentages of their clients who were selected varied. Some had 0%, some had as high as 30%. So it's so hard to predict with USCIS.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, Govind, we can't really predict, but you can still be hopeful. I mean, we never know, right? What can happen the next moment. So, you can keep your hopes high. And the next question that we have is from Takai. I hope I'm taking the name right. I'm sorry if I'm not. And says, "Hi, can a prior marriage of my US citizen spouse can affect my green card? She filed for her ex-husband many years ago. I enter in USA with inspection." Okay, do we have a second part to it?
Yeah, actually, that's really interesting. I just did a consultation yesterday where this was one of the issues that my client was asking about. So the answer is it might. I think it would depend. The questions that I would ask would be, what was the outcome of that first application? Did USCIS approve the green card for spouse number 1 or not? What actually happened? Were there any red flags? Was USCIS satisfied that the first marriage was bona fide, meaning legitimate? Then my other questions would be, well, what happened to that first marriage? Did things just not work out? Was there a divorce? I would look out for red flags. Did immigration question the legitimacy of the marriage? These are details you want to know, right? So the other question I would ask would be, Immigration will also ask about the bona fides of your current marriage. Um, how did you meet? Do you have enough proof that you are in a real marriage? Do you live together? Do you have joint documents? Do you
Mhm.
share in financial resources? Do you pay household bills together? Do you file your taxes jointly? Will you be scheduled for an adjustment interview? With marriage cases, what immigration has been doing is instead of always requiring an adjustment interview to test the marriage, sometimes what they will do is they'll issue an RFE or an NOID requesting evidence of cohabitation. And if the response to the RFE or NOID is sufficient, then immigration can approve the green card application without requiring an interview. So this has been happening more and more in the last 2 years, I would say. It's something that they realized during the pandemic. They used to require marriage interviews in every single case because of the concern for marriage fraud. But then when the whole world shut down, they realized, wow, we can't schedule every client, every couple for an interview. We would never, get out of the backlog that built up
Yeah.
as a result of the pandemic. So, I have to give it to immigration, whoever came up with this idea of waiving interviews if an RFE can satisfy that question of whether or not it's a real marriage. I would have to say that's one of the few good things or good ideas that immigration has come up with.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for answering the question, Sue. And thank you so much. Okay, he says they approved it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if I were the USCIS officer, and if let's say you are scheduled for an interview, don't be surprised if they ask questions like, "What happened with the previous marriage? Why did it fall apart?" So be prepared. Immigration might ask questions of both the petitioner, but also the beneficiary. I've had officers ask at the interview, to the beneficiary, did you know that yours, spouse was married before? Did you know their ex's name? Or did you know like how long their relationship was? Or do you know why their marriage didn't last? So
Mhm.
be prepared to be asked those questions as well, because it all goes to this whole question or concern of how well do you know your spouse?
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for answering the question. I hope you have got the answer. And thank you so much for commenting and asking a question. Let us know if you have a follow up. And we are here for another 30 minutes, I would say. And so we are already into, we have already completed our 31st half of the show, I mean, 30 minutes. And, before I took up the questions from the viewers, we were talking about those, politics and, your stance on Trump coming back and all that. But before that, we were talking about our topic, which was about hiring the right attorney, right? So,
Yes.
and you mentioned, you actually pointed out some great things about how they can verify hiring a right attorney. Right, but
Mhm.
are there? I would also like to know from you: are there some specific? There are some specific credentials that the client should also be looking at?
Well, in terms of credentials, generally, no. You just want to make sure that they're licensed in the US, because I think in some communities, there's this, perception that if someone is licensed to practice anywhere in the world, that they automatically can practice law here in the US. That's not the case. So if like someone is licensed to practice in another country, that doesn't mean that they necessarily are licensed to practice here in the US. And that's where I've seen a number of issues come up where that attorney who doesn't have a license to practice in the US,
Mhm.
you know, just be on the lookout for that. The problem is, what happens if the lawyer you hire commits malpractice? What happens if they're incompetent and they screw up your case? And then you want to file a complaint against them. Well, if they're not licensed here, anywhere in the US, you can't really go after them, right? They have nothing at risk to lose. If they don't have a license to practice in the US, then who's going to prosecute them? They don't care. They won't really care about mishandling cases, right? They have nothing at stake to lose.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, all right. But also, what should the clients consider when assessing an attorney's experience in handling similar cases to theirs?
Um, I mean, I've had clients ask me, how many cases of this type have you handled before? What's your
Okay,
success rate? I
right.
mean, I don't know if you necessarily need to hire a lawyer who has handled like 100 cases before yours, but you have to feel
Mhm.
comfortable with the client that you choose, right? If your if your attorney says, um, if they're very vague about this, then you might want to wonder, well, maybe do they really know what they're doing? And it's not to say that if your lawyer has never handled your type of case before, that they won't do a good job. I think it
Mhm.
depends on the type of case. If it's a complex deportation case, you probably don't want to hire a lawyer who has never handled a deportation case before, right? So
Mhm.
that's one thing to think about. How complex is your case? The other thing is, who are you hiring? Are you hiring a law firm? Who will you be working with? Are you
Yep.
going to be working with an associate attorney, or are you going to be working with a partner? These are questions I would ask. You know, you want to know about the lawyer's staff. When you become a client, who will you be mostly in touch with? The attorney, him or herself, or will it be with a paralegal? You want to know what the structure of the law office is. And, one complaint that I hear a lot from consultations with clients is that, my previous attorney, the only time I spoke to them was at the consultation, and then I
Mhm.
never saw or heard from them again. Every time I call or email, I'm always handed off to someone else, and no one in the staff knows what's going on with my case. That's not what you want to hear.
Mhm.
Um, so I think you have to strike a balance. Not that, you should be able to reach your attorney every single time you have a question, because that also can become difficult for the attorney as well. If I had spent my day answering emails and phone calls all day, I would never actually get to the work that my clients hire me to do. So, use your judgment. If you have a question about your case, ask if someone in your lawyer's office can answer the question for you, like, a legal assistant or a paralegal. There are
Mhm.
also some questions that I get asked a lot
Mhm.
that I already provide my clients with instructions on how to look up certain things about your case. So, for
Mhm.
example, things like processing times, what's the status of my case? These are things you can look up on USCIS if you have a filed case and you have the receipt number, rather than asking or relying on your attorney all the time to look up the status. You can enter your receipt number. You can find out what USCIS says is the latest action on your case.
Mhm.
Um, so there's some things that the client can kind of do proactively. Another thing is, aside from USCIS, for example, the Labor Department, if someone is going through a perm labor certification, one question I get asked a lot is also, how long is a perm case taking? How long is the prevailing wage determination taking? Well, the
Mhm.
Labor Department posts processing time, so you can check and see how long is a perm case taking? What month are they on? How long is an audited perm case taking? These are all things you can look up, right? And so if you're asking your lawyer this question, they're looking at the
Mhm.
same website. They don't have access to any more
Mhm.
information than what is on the Labor Department's website.
Right, right. Well, Sue, thank you so much for taking that up and for answering the question. You are answering all of our question in so much detail, and we are loving it. And our audiences are also loving it, and they are continuously commenting with their own questions. So I don't think I have time to ask my own questions. So I'll give my questions a bit rest and quickly jump to go take a break. And after we come
Okay.
from the break, we will be talking about we will be taking up the audience's question.
Okay.
Our lovely audiences, I would like to tell you, I hope so far the session is helpful and informative to you. I'm sure it is because it is to me. So if you want to reach out to Sue, you can give her a call at +1 212 785 8383. Is that right, Sue?
That is correct.
Okay, great. So I would like to repeat the number +1 212 785 8383 is her number. You can give her a call, and her mail ID is Sue TSUI at yeeimmigration.com. TSUI at yeeimmigration.com. Her website is www.yeeimmigration.com. And if you're looking for a project placement or visa sponsorship, you can reach out to me on my number, which is +1 732 707 9151. My email ID is rajni@highrightypeople.com. And you can also visit our website, which is www.highrightypeople.com. Remember, we sponsor H-1B visas and other work visas based on job availability and regulations. And before I go into the break, I would also like to tell you that we are soon going to come up with a Telugu channel, Immigration and Jobs Talk Show Telugu channel. We are going to have where we are going to do these immigration shows also in Telugu language. So that is something that we are going to come up with soon. So stay tuned for that as well. But right now, let's go take a break and come back from the break quickly because I can't wait to take your question. And I'm sure Sue can't wait to answer them as well. So let's go take a break and we'll be back in no time.
Consultant seeking a new opportunity? We offer job placement services for US citizens, green cards, EADs, and visa holders. We also sponsor various work visas like H-1B, E3, TN, and green cards. 20 plus years of experience in the industry. Exceptional employee benefits. Highly rated by our employees. Global presence with 200 plus recruiters and direct clients. Connect with us. Call us on the number 732-707-9151 or mail us at rajni@highrightypeople.com or visit our website www.highrightypeople.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Rajni Bharara, and you're watching Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. And today I have with me none other than immigration attorney Tsui Yee. So, hi, Sue. Welcome back after the break.
Thank you, Rajni. Good to be back.
And so now, without any further ado, let me quickly take our audience's question because they are waiting for an answer from you. So we are actually getting a lot of questions from the viewers. So to I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. Adi Wumi. I hope I'm taking the name right, but if I'm not, I'm really sorry. Says hello and have posted this on Facebook and says, "How is the H-1B visa lottery going on?" All right. What would you like to say, Sue?
I think this was kind of asked right before.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, we are getting this question again and again on each of our episode, each of our webinar, and people are also posting it on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere because they're eagerly waiting for the second round. But still, I mean, if you like to give an answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say what I said before is I think it depends on how many H-1 petitions are being approved. And since the deadline to file was only on June 30th, we can't assume that immigration has adjudicated all of these H-1B petitions. So just going to have to wait and be patient.
Right. So thank you so much for your question. I hope you have got the answer. I mean, you can still be hopeful. I mean, you never know. So let's quickly take our next question from our next viewer, and is from Hiwat. And Hiwat says, "Hi, could you shed some light on what kind of non-immigrant visas can an ex-spouse be to avail EAD from I-765V without violating the non-immigration status?" And also, he also has a second part and says, "Can the ex-spouse be on an F1 visa and work on EAD from the form I-765V without violating the F1 status?" I think
So this question is a little complicated. I think the I-765V, I don't handle these myself, but I believe it's the application for a work permit if you are an abused spouse of an H-1B holder. So I would say for this type of question, it's pretty technical. I would suggest having a consultation, scheduling consultation with an immigration attorney who has experience with obtaining these EADs, right?
right.
I can't really address this question. I think the other thing is that, generally speaking, if you are the ex-spouse, it's the question is a little unclear. So this person is asking if the ex-spouse can be on an F1. Sure, why not? Right? I'm assuming the ex-spouse is enrolling in an academic program, right? As long as they're enrolled, they should be able to obtain F1 on their own instead of F2. And then, but there's the second part of the question: can they work on an EAD based on I-765V without violating F1 status? That's the part that's kind of technical. I would consult with an attorney who has experience with
And
these.
he specializes in this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Hiwat, thank you so much for asking your question. And like Sue said, you can take this question to an attorney who specializes in this, but she tried to give you an answer. So thank you so much for your question. Let us know if you have another question for Sue. And meanwhile, let's take another question from a viewer, and it is from Karishma. And Karishma says, "Given that I'm currently on an F1 visa and just graduated, how can I smoothly transition to a green card through employment?"
Okay, so this is a bit deceptively simple question, but honestly, there's so many ways to answer this question.
Okay.
I will say that most of the time, someone who is here on an F1 first would need to secure a temporary non-immigrant status to stay in the US. So usually that means an H-1B work visa. It's not impossible to go straight from a student to getting a green card, but generally speaking, if you want to obtain a green card, you have to be sponsored either by a family member or an employer. So I don't really know if you have either available to you. I have no details to go off of. So if you have a family member who is eligible to sponsor you, that's one way, through family immigration. If you don't, then you would try to find a U.S. employer who's willing to sponsor you for a green card. And what kind of case that looks like, it all depends. It depends on the job you're being sponsored for. It depends on your qualifications. What degrees do you have? What work experience you have? It depends on what type of green card application you're eligible for. Is this a perm labor certification? Or do you have the qualifications for maybe an EB-1A, maybe an NIW? I would need more details. There's no simple, easy answer for this type of question. You really need to kind of think through all of these questions that I'm laying out. But most of all, you want to figure out what's your immediate next step. It's not going to be the green card for most of the cases, unless you are a strong candidate for EB-1A or NIW and you can skip the entire changing into a non-immigrant status.
Okay, so Karishma, maybe what you can do is you can give more specifics and more details about your case, so that Sue can give you a better answer about your scenario. So we are here for another like 15 minutes. So please if you can send us a follow-up. Meanwhile, let's quickly take another question. So the next question that we have is from Chian, and Chian says, "I'm currently on a B1 visa. What steps should I take to adjust my status to an employment-based green card?" Okay, people really want to get a green card, it
Yeah.
seems,
I mean,
right?
my answer would be very similar to the previous question. So going from tourist to green card, I
Wow.
mean, you really need to kind of find out what you might be eligible for. Employment-based green card. My question to you is there a US sponsor? Is there a company here in the US willing to sponsor you for a green card? If so, what kind of job is it? What are the requirements for this job? Is the employer going to file a perm on your behalf? Or are you applying through self-petition, maybe
Right.
EB-1A, maybe NIW? Secondly, you're here on a B1 visa. That means you're only here for 6 months.
Mhm.
Uh, the majority of employment-based green cards will take a lot more than 6 months.
Yeah.
Third thing to think about, what country are you a citizen of? You want to get familiar with the visa bulletin. What country are you chargeable to? Meaning the country where you are born, it's going to have an impact on when there's going to be a visa number available to you. So if you're EB1, EB2, or EB3, you want to look at the visa bulletin and you want to see what country you are a citizen of, because the backlog countries, China, India, Mexico, Philippines, that's another hurdle to think about. You know, depending on, especially if you're a citizen of one of these backlog countries, the waiting time to receive a green card could be many, many years. And your B1 stay is not going to cover all that time that the green card process will require.
Right, right. Okay, so Chian, again, if you can give more details about your case, there are a lot of questions that Sue asked from you. So if you can answer all those questions, so she'll be able to help you with a better answer. But thank you so much for posting your question. And let's quickly move on to our next viewer. So the next question that we have is from Madhur Priya. Okay, so Madhur Priya says, "My son wishes to pursue a master's degree in the United States. When he applies for an F1 visa, will the US consulate reject his ready to interview his green card petition? Please provide suggestions."
So I don't really know what ready to interview green card petition means. What does ready to interview mean?
Okay, I mean, if you can, again, write a question in a detailed way so that, again, Sue can answer you in a better, with a better answer, Madhu Priya. Let's take Tony's question in the meanwhile. So Tony says, what innovative technologies or digital tools are available to streamline the immigration application process and enhance communication with immigration
Are you
authorities?
speaking from the point of view of a client or the point of view of an attorney? Because the thing is,
I
USCIS,
think Tony is
go ahead.
asking from a client's point of view. I mean,
Um,
if you can clarify, Tony.
I'm assuming he's not an attorney, but I guess the question is like, the question more is like, what tools does USCIS use, right? Because it kind of doesn't matter what tools you use. If the government doesn't use it, then it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, in terms of communicating with immigration authorities, in what context do you want to be communicating with them, with USCIS? They're not exactly the type of government agency that you can just like pick up the phone and expect to speak to a live immigration officer. They're extremely bureaucratic. It's very difficult to get a hold of an immigration officer. They have an 800 number, but when you call them, you're dealing with a contractor who's not a USCIS officer. So they're just there following a phone script. So my answer is, it kind of doesn't matter what technologies or tools you have. If immigration doesn't use it, it's not really going to help you.
Right. Okay. Mhm. Thank you so much, Tony, for your question. I hope you have got the answer. Let's quickly take another viewer question in the meanwhile, because we have last 10 minutes. And let's quickly take next question. The next question that we have is from, okay, Shiron. So Shiron says, "How can I effectively manage dual citizenship or residency status if I have family ties or business interest in multiple countries?" Wow.
Okay, so first off, this question involves more than one country's immigration laws. So I don't think there's a way I can answer this because I'm only licensed to practice US immigration law. I have no idea what other dual citizenship countries the inquirer is referring to. It will depend on the type of other types of citizenship you're talking about. So, for example, in US immigration law, for the most part, dual citizenship is allowed, but there are certain exceptions. So, for example, I'll just throw out one or two examples. Citizens of Japan and China, if they apply for naturalization, technically they cannot hold on to both dual citizenship between US and China and US and Japan. So I guess my question is, it really depends on the countries that you're talking about. You would need to consult with attorneys who are licensed to practice in those other countries because there's no way to answer this question without getting more than one attorney involved because this involves more than just one type of law. And you want to make sure you are getting advice from the appropriate attorney who's licensed to answer that question in that particular country.
Yeah. Okay, so Sharon, thank you so much for your question. That was an interesting question. But like Sue said, she is specialized, in the US immigration. So maybe you can ask this question to some other attorney. But thank you so much again for your question. And let's quickly take our next question from our next viewer. So the next question is again from Tony, and Tony says, I am a consultant. And if you remember Tony's question, Sue, so
Right.
he was asking about, do you remember?
Yes, about the technologies.
Right.
Yeah, my answer is still the same. You know, like until immigration decides to implement more up to date technologies, then you can't really do much.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Tony, for your question. Let's quickly take our next question. So Mayuka is here, and Mayuka says, what common mistake should I avoid when submitting additional evidence for my application?
So, by additional evidence, do you mean responding to a request for further evidence?
I I think so.
Assuming that that's the question.
That's the question.
Common mistakes. Okay. Some common mistakes would be not addressing every single issue that immigration raises in the RFE. So let's say if they have raised, I don't know, let's say 10 questions, and you only submit evidence to address 7 of those. They can deny your application for, on that basis alone, saying you didn't comply, you didn't address every single thing that we raised in the RFE. That would be a pretty big mistake to overlook. The second is read the RFE very carefully. The thing is, if you have an RFE issued, do yourself a favor and hire an attorney, right? Because the devil is in the details. Sometimes these RFEs don't really make sense. Sometimes they ask for things that were already submitted. So you really should read the RFE very carefully. And I've seen plenty of mistakes on RFEs where the immigration officer is confusing my client's name. They're confusing the type of application they're seeking. They're confusing facts in the case. So you don't want to respond to a query where it doesn't apply to your situation. It doesn't apply to your case. It could very well be that the officer is mixing up your case with some other case that they're dealing with. So it's super important to really make sure that you address all of the appropriate areas in the RFE and also point out to the officer any mistakes that they've made on their part, because you can pretty much turn the table around and say, how closely are you reviewing my case if you don't even really know what my name is, or if you think I'm a he when I'm actually a she. I've seen this many, many times, and it's usually a sign that the officer is not paying attention, not doing their job. They're dealing with too many cases. So I use that actually in my RFE response, and I point out to them that, look, I'm entitled to a fair officer. And the fact that you're making so many mistakes means that maybe you're not doing your job correctly.
Right, right. Okay, so Mayuka, thank you so much for your question. I hope you have got the answer. And I hope RFE is something that you are referring to. And thank you so much again for your question. And let's quickly take another question that is from Ankit. And Ankit says, what specific experience and expertise should I look for in an immigration lawyer to ensure? Now, this is a question that is from the topic that we were
Yeah,
discussing today, right?
right.
Okay, let me again read out the question. What specific experience and expertise should I look for in an immigration lawyer to ensure they can handle complex cases related to work visas for international employees in the tech industry?
Okay, so what kind of work visas are we talking about? Are we talking about H-1Bs, L-1s, TNs? That's my first question. And I would ask this attorney as well, the attorney that you're considering hiring, you want to ask them specifically, what type of visas do you need for your employees? And does this attorney have experience in those specific types of work visas? The second question is, when you say complex, why are they complex? Is it because the jobs might not fall under the definition of specialty occupation or some other reason? So I would hone in and I would ask Ankit, what do you think makes your cases complex, right? And you want to raise those questions to the attorney at the consultation. I think that these cases would be complex because of XYZ. How would you approach it, or how would you deal with it if this were to come up with immigration? Have you ever dealt with this complexity before, and what was the outcome?
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Ankit, thank you so much again for your question. And I know we have 1 minute to go, but if you allow, I would like to take one last question for today's show.
Sure.
All right, so one last question for today is from Vernon. And Vernon says, one of my friends joined a consulting firm on OPT after realizing that it was fraud. He decided to leave in 2 months. The company is not providing experience letter for those 2 months and not, can we have the second part? And not him in any employment verification for the future. Is it possible to remove this employer from his history by requesting university DSO to count those 2 months into unemployment days, and any consequences of trying to come out clean now with DSO? My friend is okay with losing those OPT days.
This is a pretty big issue. Companies that are claiming that someone was working for them on OPT when in fact there was never such any work. So my question would be, what exactly was the fraud that the company was engaging in? And secondly, did the student have any role to play at all in this fraud? Because this is an issue that's coming up more and more often at the embassies. I've done a fair number of consultations where a student went back to the home country, applied for, let's say, an H-1B visa, and then the embassy denies them the visa, saying, we know that you engaged in fraud, that during your OPT, you claimed that you worked for XYZ company and you actually never worked there. So you just want to, I would just ask more questions on what exactly was the fraud that you're talking about, and what was the extent of the student's involvement in the fraud. If the student really had no idea that fraud was being committed, well, then my other question would be, did the student actually work at that company? Yes or no? The embassies are really looking into this particular issue. So I don't really know if there's a way that they can, when you say come clean, what does that mean? Come clean of what? I would need more details.
And we will need more details, right, Sue? Yeah. Actually, Ankit is back and he says H-1B, I think, if you remember his question.
Oh, complex cases?
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, is it because you're worried that the jobs might not be considered to be specialty occupation? Or what exactly is the complex issue that you're worried about?
So he says also, how can I evaluate the level of communication, responsiveness, and transparency I can expect from an immigration lawyer to ensure they will keep me informed and up to date throughout the process?
Well, you ask the attorney, So, for example, when a client hires me, I include a communications policy in my retainer agreement. It's a rider and it explains what my communication policy is going to be. It talks about what is my preferred mode of communication, during what hours you can contact me. Definitely don't be texting me at 12 midnight, right? So I'm very clear with my clients, and the thing is, I'm a solo attorney. So if you're asking me a question, I usually will respond as best as I can, but realize that your attorney could be doing any number of meetings, consultations, immigration interviews, immigration court appearances. So they're not always at their desk. And if they don't get back to you, don't assume that it's because they're just sitting there, like, not doing anything. They're probably busy, like most
Of
attorneys.
course. Also, they do
Um,
have a personal life as well, right? I mean,
yeah, we have
you
personal
can't
lives.
expect that from the attorneys. I mean,
We
they
also have
obviously.
staff. It also depends on the nature of the question. Like I said before, the most common questions that I get asked by clients are, what's going on with my case? What's the status of my case?
Right.
We are lawyers, we're not magicians. If your case is within processing times, then we cannot just simply call up immigration and demand for them to make a decision on your case. So our hands are tied a lot of the time as well. If I had more influence over immigration, my job would be a lot easier.
Right.
So I guess the answer to your question is, you want to ask the attorney at the time that you hire, what exactly is their communication policy?
But so I would like to add here that you do change the life of your client like a magician. So that's why I think they expect you to be a magician, right? So, I'm continuously getting questions from our viewers. Actually, Vernon is back, and Rajesh is also here. He has posted another question about his situation, but I don't think we have enough time to take them for today. But that's
Maybe
okay.
we
I
could
mean,
do, yeah, like a follow up,
yeah,
a
an
follow up
episode
show.
two, because even I didn't get a chance to ask my questions, right?
Then we'll have a continuation.
Right, right, absolutely. So thank you so much, Sue. It was great having you. It was a great first episode. Had got some great answers from you. So thank you so much for an amazing episode.
Thank you,
Amazing
Rajni.
first episode, I would say.
Thank you so much. I actually enjoyed this. It was kind of fun.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And guys, if you want to connect with Sue, actually, Warren was saying that I will reach out to you for a discussion and explain it in
Okay.
detail. Appreciate your time. So, Warren, you can note down the details, and all other viewers, you can also please note down Sue's detail if you want to connect with her. Her contact number is +1 212 785 8383. I would like to repeat the number: +1 212 785 8383. Her email is sue@yeeimmigration.com. Her website is www.yeeimmigration.com. All right. And if you are looking for a job, a project placement, or visa sponsorship, you can reach out to me on my number, which is +1 732 707 9151. My email is rajni@higherightpeople.com. And you can also visit our website, which is www.higherightpeople.com. Remember, we sponsor H-1B visas and other work visas based on job availability and regulations. All right, so we have come to the end of our episode, and that's a wrap. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have, and it was going great. And I would love to have you back for an episode two. And thank you again. It was lovely having you.
Let's make it happen. So I look forward to doing another episode with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And to our
Thanks,
lovely
Rajni.
audiences, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So, to our lovely audiences, thank you so much for such great questions. You guys were amazing as always. And I would like to tell you, before I end this session, I would also like to tell you that we are also going to come up with our immigration and jobs Telugu channel, and we are going to have these shows like we do in English. So we are also going to have in Telugu language. So stay tuned for that. We are going to give out more details about that channel. And for now, I will have to take your leave. And it was a great episode. Thank you so much. If you liked the episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. But for now, like I always say, thank you for joining. Stay tuned with us and keep smiling and keep subscribing to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I'm Rajni Bharara signing off for now. Bye.
Consultant seeking a new opportunity? We offer job placement services for US citizens, green cards, EADs, and visa holders. We also sponsor various work visas like H-1B, E3, TN, and green cards. 20 plus years of experience in the industry. Exceptional employee benefits. Highly rated by our employees. Global presence with 200 plus recruiters and direct clients. Connect with us. Call us on the number 732-707-9151 or mail us at rajni@higheritpeople.com or visit our website www.higheritpeople.com.